Thank you. Honourable members, I have a petition regarding the release of the free-day secondary education capitation deficit for the academic year 2019 and the financial years 2020-2021 to 2022-2023 by the National Treasury. Honourable members, Article 119 of the Constitution accords any person the right to petition Parliament to consider any matter within its authority. Further, Standing Order 2252B requires the Speaker to report to the House any petition other than those presented by a member. Honourable members, in this regard, I wish to report to the House that my office has received a petition from one Mr. Indimuli Kahi, OGW, of PO Box 20658, 0020 Nairobi, the National Chairperson, Kenya Secondary Schools Heads Association, KESHA, a professional organization comprising over 10,000 head teachers drawn from public secondary schools in Kenya. The petitioner states that the association appreciates the continued support the government has accorded schools through the free-day secondary education program since its inception in 2008 by granting capitation per annum. The program has greatly enhanced access, retention, and completion rates in secondary schools. The petitioner explains that in 2008, the rate per learner was 10,625. This was increased to 12,870 in 2015, and then to Kenya shillings 22,244 in 2018. In addition, public secondary schools were only allowed to charge boarding fees as said by the Minister of Education. Honourable members, the petitioner is concerned that despite the increase in capitation per learner, the Government of Kenya subsidy for the free-day secondary program has consistently been lower than the actual enrollment. Among reasons that have caused this worrying trend include increase in enrollment in January while utilizing the budget allocations made in November, December of the previous year. The fact that a number of students have experienced challenges in obtaining birth certificates and are therefore not captured on the NEMIS platform, which the Minister of Education utilizes to disburse capitation to schools based on the number of students captured, and partial disbursement of the approved budget capitation since 2018. The petitioner therefore prays that the National Assembly compels the Treasury to release capitation at the approved rate of 22,244 per learner for the year 2022-23-24 and release the deficit from 2019 amounting to 54,220,185,855 to enable schools to pay the ever-rising pending bills. Honourable members, having established that the matter raised in the petition is well within the authority of this House, and further that the matters raised in this petition are not pending before any court of law, constitutional or legal body, I hereby commit the petition to the Public Petitions Committee for consideration pursuant to Standing Order 208A. The committee is required to consider the petition and report its findings to the House and to the petition in accordance with the Standing Orders 2272. I thank you. Yes, Minority Leader. You want to speak to the petition?
Yes.
Yes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes.
Yes, actually, I've listened keenly to the petition, and it raises very, very grave issues. First and foremost, let me thank the KESHA. KESHA is an established association of head teachers of secondary schools, and they've been very instrumental in management of our schools across the country. Mr. Speaker, the reason why I'm saying the petition is raising very grave issues is that the government must have done some costing for it to have arrived at the figures you just referred to, way back from 2018, or 208. The Speaker, it is true that even as we speak, even though now schools are closed, a number of schools are struggling to make ends meet. Whereas on one hand, head teachers are not allowed to charge extra fees. On the other hand, the government has consistently failed to remit the capitation money. So how then do you expect these heads to run their schools? That's the question that really needs to be answered. How does the government expect secondary schools to run without money if the heads cannot charge extra fees? And yet, the money that's supposed to come from the National Treasury is not coming. So how then do you want our secondary schools to be run? This is an issue, Mr. Speaker, that calls for serious introspection, not only on the part of the government, but indeed on the part of the whole citizenry. Mr. Speaker, this House has got a duty to address this matter with finality. This House must address this matter with finality. Leave alone even the issue of the arrears. The arrears are, the figures you're talking about are monumental, in tens of billions of shillings. I can see the chairman of the Education Committee, my friend is looking at me, Corneli Serem. Is it? Meli. Meli, you know, is my neighbor up there in Kisumu. You know, unless you want us to continue burying our heads in the sand, we must either say that the government is unable to support secondary education by way of capitation, or allow the head teachers to charge extra fees with attendant ramifications. And therefore, in a nutshell, I want to say this petition is timely and it needs to be processed expeditiously. In fact, I would suggest that in addition to the Committee on Education held by my friend Meli, we also need perhaps to incorporate some more people so that we have this issue dealt with in a holistic manner. Thank you.
KJ.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you. And this is an important petition, Mr. Speaker, because it goes beyond the disbursements and the delays in disbursements. Mr. Speaker, we as a country will not be able to finance the support of students whose numbers we do not know, Mr. Speaker. And that's why the drive towards digital identification and the digital registration of students becomes extremely important, Mr. Speaker. Previously, the government has been disbursing monies to schools without even ascertaining the exact number of students in any given institution. It has been guesswork, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if the government would be able to identify an individual at birth, such a government is able to plan for the life of the individual, not only through schools, but even as they come into the working environment and as they go into becoming an economic contributor in this country. So, Mr. Speaker, as the Petitions Committee looks at this, as the Education Committee looks at this, they've also got to be able to come up with a system that establishes the exact number of learners in our institutions. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity.
Oyula Joseph. Is that Joseph Oyula? Yes. Give him the mic.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I was not prepared for this petition.
Oh, you are on the screen. Kemei. Beatrice Kemei, are you on the screen for this? Those of you who are not interested in this petition, can you delog yourselves off the screen? Interventions. Posing David. Where is Posing?
I'm here.
Yes.
Of course, you know, Mr. Speaker, I was prepared to lay a paper, but of course I can say something. Speaker, this is a very important petition, as members said, but I'm asking myself, does that require a petition, Speaker? Doesn't require a petition. It's common knowledge. Where is the minister in charge of education in this country?
Any Kenyan has the right to petition this house,
what
whether
I'm
it's
saying,
common
Speaker.
knowledge or not.
I thank you, Speaker. But that is an indictment, Speaker, to the Minister of Education. That's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't require a Kenyan to be able to go, think, write a petition, send to you, Speaker, and you read on the floor of the House. That is an indictment to the Minister for Education. And therefore, Speaker, my only contribution to this petition is it should go to the Leader of Majority, Honorable Speaker, not the Petition Committee, not the Committee on Education, so that the spokesman of government in the House can pick up this issue and implement more or quickly, more than a petition, Speaker. I would wish that you direct that this petition should go to the Leader of Majority so that for quick intervention, Honorable Speaker. I thank you.
Didymus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support these very important and grave issues that are being raised by the petitioner. However, Honorable Speaker, I feel like the committee should urgently and expeditiously, the Committee on Education, they should engage Treasury in liaison with the relevant committee, so that as the petition committee will be proceeding with this petition, they can also try to ensure that the ministry fixes this matter, very important, so that our children cannot be disenfranchised, and so that they can continue to enjoy the free secondary education. Honorable Speaker, I support.
Kitonga Murugara.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, this is a timely petition, and it does raise several issues. The first issue is on issuance of birth certificates to our pupils. We know very well this is a problem countrywide, and that we need to continue decentralizing into every sub-county so that birth certificates are issued. From there, we move to NEMIS, which is the registration of students, so that they are able to get capitation. Again, there should be no issues with this. From there, we move to the government issuing the actual money to the schools in accordance with the number of students in the NEMIS. Again, here, there should be no hindrance. If we do this, then our education system will be seamless, it will flow well, and we will not be having such petitions which now tell us to go back to the year 2018, 2019, so that we can pay arrears. I urge the Public Petition Committee to move this speed and resolve this issue. Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I
Majority
support
Leader,
this petition.
This teacher is raising several things. The most important one, apart from the arrears, is that children cannot be captured by NEMIS without birth certificates. And that may not be resolved by the Petitions Committee. So you have to give direction on that.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and is indeed one of the issues I had noted to ask the Public Petitions Committee to also involve in their deliberations on this issue, to involve the Office of the Registrar of Persons. Two, Honorable Speaker, it is quite clear at every turn of the year, government should know how many students are actually in classrooms from class 1, grade 1, all the way to Form 4. Therefore, there should be no reason, Honorable Speaker, why even at the turn of the year in January, someone should claim what Mr. Indimuli says here, that in January, because the data that was used was from November, December, there are more students admitted into secondary schools. Because those students are never admitted from the blues. It is children who sat KCPE in the previous year, and government knows how many students actually sat for KCPE, for instance, in this financial year, and therefore they should be able to plan for them. Honorable Speaker, also to note that Parliament also has a role to play. The Chairman of Education, I'm sure, Honorable Speaker, you give him a chance, will tell you that there is always a financing gap of about 22 billion shillings in secondary school education funding. And therefore, that occasions the deficits that come in, and the Committee for Budget and Appropriation must therefore ensure that we appropriate adequate resources towards not just day secondary schools, but even for our boarding schools. Two, Honorable Speaker, there are also cases of fraud, and members will tell you across all our constituencies, there are teachers who also escalate the actual number of students they have in NEMIS vis-a-vis the students who are in classrooms, causing a great disservice to others who are not captured in NEMIS. But the ministry should leverage on ICT. And I like what the member for Dagoretti South has said. There is no reason today, in this day and age, when we can be able to capture all these students right from grade 1 to Form 4 and leverage on ICT to ensure that every student has funds attached to that student, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I heard the leader of minority in his contribution propose that maybe government should say they are unable to pay and allow head teachers to increase fees. Honorable Speaker, we must never allow, under these strenuous economic times, any head teacher anywhere to increase fees. The government of Kenya should be able to pay school fees for all our children. And therefore, I want to advise my good friend, the Honorable Pio and I, because I have seen them claim that school fees is going up, the cost of fuel is going up. You cannot also be saying here that we allow school fees to go up. School fees must not go up at all, Honorable Speaker. We have also bursaries. And it's the same person yesterday who raised the issue of bursaries. We must also ensure, Honorable Speaker, the multiplicity of bursary funds in this country is an issue, whether we like it or not, at one point or the other, we must be able to look into. MPs, or rather NGCDF, has a bursary kitty. The Ministry of Education has a bursary kitty. The county governments, against the Constitution, Honorable Speaker, now have a bursary kitty for secondary schools. This multiplicity of these bursaries, Honorable Speaker, if we do not confront it today and in the near future, will become a big problem to us. Probably it is that money that is being taken to bursaries that we should be redirecting to capitation of secondary schools. If all our secondary school public schools, all our students in public schools in secondary were catered for fully, including those who are boarders in schools, we may never need to give bursaries to anybody. And that is part of the data, Honorable Speaker. I'm saying the ministry should also, and I hope the Public Petitions Committee will also be able to interrogate the ministry to ascertain what is the actual cost of maintaining a child in a day secondary school, what is the actual cost to maintain a child in a boarding school, whether it's an extra county, a county school, a national school, and how possible is it if we are to pull all the resources we have in the county governments, in NGCDF, in the Ministry of Education for bursaries, to secondary school capitation, then we may never need to give people this handout business of bursaries. Honorable Speaker, I beg to support, and I hope the Public Petitions Committee will be able to look into all these issues. And I do hope the chair of the Education Committee could also speak to the issues of the actual budgetary deficits that exist, that occasion some of these deficits in financing. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Robert Mbui, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this petition. Mr. Speaker, the issue of capitation has been first, it is always delayed, and secondly, Mr. Speaker, it is also always never enough. Mr. Speaker, on the matter that has been raised here by the petitioners of the government knowing the number of children, let us be honest to ourselves, Mr. Speaker. The government knows the number of children in every school because every classroom teacher must every single day, morning and afternoon, sign a class register confirming the number of children in that school. So it's not rocket science. Every principal knows the number of children. Mr. Speaker, the problem we face is when we are told that the children must have birth certificates to be put in the NEMI system. And Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, it is also the government that is in control of the delivery and the production of birth certificates. So parents are unable unless they go and queue for long hours to get birth certificates. So a lot of children don't have birth certificates and they end up not being able to be put in the system. But Mr. Speaker, even when you look at the amount of money that is given, you know, there was a time we were supporting education exams. Mr. Speaker, if you get to know the figure that is given for exams, If you get to know the amount of money that is given for sports, it is so little, Mr. Speaker, that it cannot be able to run the education system. So we need to look at how do we increase the capitation to make it enough for our children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Last on this, Melly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this petition. Mr. Speaker, I want to bring to the attention of the House that the funding gap that exists is a result of the decision of this House. That the 630 billion shillings, the primary school education is not, secondary school education is allocated around 60 billion. Of that, 22, and in that particular funding, it's supposed to have around 80-something billion shillings. So every year we have a funding gap of 22 billion. And I want to ask this House that in the next funding cycle, let us make sure that that amount of money is actually put in the budget. Two, Honorable Speaker, I also want to point out that in the various fundings that we have in this country, and I want to say the majority leader has just put it very clear. The other day we discussed with some experts that there is a lot of money outside there with the local banks, in the NGCDF, county governments, and other institutions amounting to over 30 billion shillings. If well streamed out, it can actually do a good job in terms of funding education. Two, we have this issue of a birth certificate. And I just want to address this more specifically to the Ministry of Interior. It has become a serious problem in schools to have a birth certificate. The Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Interior needs to work together so that we digitize and to get to know how many students, and every student needs to have a number so that we avoid fraud. And as Honorable KJ has just said, we really need to make sure that we have a very clear digital system in schools so that we can fund every child. We have a register in schools. So the petitions committee, and I think the education committee will have an input into this so that we solve this issue, and this one should not give parents and principals an excuse to raise fees. This is hard economic times, and actually we need to lessen the burden that we are giving to the parents of this country, that let the government pay, let the principals not raise fees at this particular time, Honorable Speaker. We need to streamline and make sure that the monies that we have reach schools on time. Lastly, Honorable Speaker, we have this issue of the budget cycle. The budget cycle and the school calendar starts at different times. This is something that we need to align. We need to sit down so that we align the budget cycle and the school calendar so that disbursements are actually in tandem with what is going on. I thank you and I support.
Thank you. The petition is committed to the Public Petitions Committee. And should they find any requirement to consult with the Committee on Interior and Education, they feel free to do so. Roeda Obo, present your petition.
I, the undersigned, on behalf of residents of Lamu East constituency, draw the attention of the House to the following. 1, that Boni Lungi is an area of land between Dodori and Boni National Reserve in Lamu East constituency, measuring approximately 39,925.7 hectares and inhabited by over 480 households of Aware community. That Article 56 of Constitution obliges the government to put in place affirmative action program for minorities and marginalized groups. Further, the national land policy calls for the protection of land rights from unjust and illegal dispensation of both vulnerable and minority communities. That Gazette number 1447 of 2016, published on 4th March 2016, the Cabinet Secretary for Environment, Natural Resource and Regional Development Authority declared Boni Lungi as a state forest. That the gazettement was done without consulting the people and the leader of the affected region, contrary to the Article 10(2)(a) of the Constitution that provide for the public participation in making, implementation public policies, and in applying the laws. Further, the gazettement was in breach of the provision of Article 69(1)(d) that required the state to encourage public participation in environmental management. That the land in question is actually community land, that the local people have been farming, depending on resources for collecting natural fruits, honey, plants for traditional medicine and building materials. That being one of the most marginal...
24th of June 2023, and we took time, Mr. Speaker, to listen to the Member of Parliament representing Jagamwe, and also members of the public who are living, or tenants who are living in those particular houses, Mr. Speaker. And there were so many issues which were raised. And in conclusion, I am in agreement that there are some issues that need further investigation so that we can understand, especially the issue of tenants who have been living in those particular houses, Mr. Speaker. And some of the original tenants, some of them might have passed on, leaving their children behind, and these children maybe are not employed and they cannot pay or continuously pay for these particular services or pay for the rents on those particular houses, Mr. Speaker. And I thought maybe we need to have a further discussion on this so that we can ensure that those people are not unfairly evicted from those particular homes. Mr. Speaker, I think I'll end there, Mr. Speaker, by saying that the answer to some of the issues which were raised by the member is what the State Department is trying to do, Mr. Speaker, building houses, affordable housing, and doing what we call tenant purchase programs, which instead of actually renting a house, Mr. Speaker, and on retirement you leave the house to the owners, Mr. Speaker, the program of tenant purchase means that you pay rent, but towards purchase of that particular house, so that when you retire or when you die, whichever comes first, Mr. Speaker, the house remains as a property of your children. So I think that is a program which the Ministry or State Department is working on to ensure that it is not just about renting those houses and when you retire, you leave nothing to your siblings. Mr. Speaker, I submit.
Madam Mwinyi, satisfied?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Chairman Ngeno is a good friend of mine. We've been together in this house for the last 3 terms, and I respect him as my colleague. However, the issue of national housing, Mr. Speaker, in Changamwe is more than what the chair has actually alluded to. The last time they visited, which is just about 4 months ago, in the presence of the CS, Mr. Speaker, and the whole committee, they saw for themselves. New houses have been constructed, 5 stories, Mr. Speaker, yet there is no provision for water for these new units. People have to come down to the ground floor to fetch water and take them manually up to the 5th floor. They saw for themselves, Mr. Speaker, that the sewage was wanting. They also heard and verified that National Housing Corporation is not cooperating with its tenants. It is behaving in a rogue manner, Mr. Chairman. I have videos here, Mr. Speaker, of the National Housing Corporation passing bulldozers in between houses while constructing their new units without even involving the tenants themselves. So this is very inhuman. This is exactly what is happening in Palestine, Mr. Speaker. They are claiming that they are involving the Changamwe people wherever they want to do anything. It is actually false, Mr. Speaker.
Ask for clarification on the statement.
I actually would ask the chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Through the speaker.
Through the speaker.
Yeah.
Is it true that National Housing Corporation has no proper roads? Is it true it has no proper lighting? Is it true it has no wall fence to keep off robbers and burglars? Is it true that it lacks water as a facility? Mr. Speaker, I would also like to ask the chairman, as he was present while you were having this meeting, is it true that National Housing was even trying to grab school land belonging to Magongo Primary and Gome Primary? And through my intervention, Mr. Speaker, we managed to bring back those pieces of land, yet they call it political interference. Mr. Speaker, they should know our work is to represent our people. And by representing our people, it does not mean we are interfering. We are actually doing our work.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Speaker, I would actually wish that you direct the committee to conduct a proper investigation, Mr. Speaker, because once we had a board which visited, a full board, chaired by the former Ndia constituency MP, and they brought up 2 lists of debts.
Omar Mwinyi, you are debating your issue with... Give him the mic.
And that is why they have elected me 3 times, because I do represent them. So I want them to be investigated because they have no capacity to collect rent. And furthermore, Mr. Speaker, it is not their duty to collect rent. They are supposed to build and sell those properties so that they develop more for people to occupy, Mr. Speaker. They are actually forgetting even their roles. Mr. Speaker, I think I would go on and on, but then we have a schedule in this House. I want to rest my case there and to seek your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, for this committee to conduct a thorough investigation and bring a full report to this House. I know 3 managing directors who were actually fired because of mismanagement of funds. And this is because of rent collection. Mr. Speaker, I rest my case.
Johanna Ngeno, you've heard, before you've heard what the member is saying. What he's saying is that he's not happy with your statement.
Speaker, Mr. Speaker, statements are statements, and they are normally sent to the ministry for answers. And whichever answer they give you, Mr. Speaker, you may not have the opportunity to subject to thorough or further questioning. Just like the questions, question time, Mr. Speaker, is a little bit better because you have that interaction with the CS one-on-one. And I'm in total agreement with the member, Mr. Speaker, because I think we need to have a thorough investigation into this matter. And it is through your indulgence, Mr. Speaker.
What you do, Honorable Ngeno, you seem to agree that your statement is inadequate. Liaise with the member.
Correct.
And if possible, you can call the concerned minister to your committee, invite the member, and interrogate the matter further.
Correct, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable members, I'll give some direction as follows. Under order number 7, I had given an opportunity to Honorable Bashir Sheikh Abdullahi and Honorable Alice Nganga to make 15-minute statements on the proposed amendments to the Constitution. I'll do that after putting the question at order number 8, taking the Minister for Roads on the question by Robert Mbui, which is all encompassing, and thereafter Alice Nganga and Sheikh, you should be available for your statements. So let's go to call out order number 8, clerk.
Order number 8.
Hold on, clerk. Yes, Women Rep Kericho, what's the problem?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And I remember last week I came with a statement, and you directed that today I get the report. So I've just sat here.
This was after the drowning.
Yes.
The 2 people, Kenyans who drowned.
Yes. And Honorable Speaker, as I wait for the report, I'm happy to report that one of the victims were retrieved and the funeral was done yesterday, but the other one is still missing.
Still missing.
And people are waiting. I was there on Sunday. People are really waiting and they are suffering a lot, Honorable Speaker.
You'll indulge the chair. Deputy Speaker, tomorrow morning, if you are the one starting the House, let the member who is the chair of the committee concerned issue the statement tomorrow morning. Order, honorable members. Owen Bayer, take your seat. Honorable members on their feet, take your seats. Call out order number 8.
Order number 8, report of the Committee of the Whole House on the Gambling Control Bill, National Assembly Bill number 70 of 2023. Question to be put and third reading.
Order. Order, honorable member on your feet, take your seat. Honorable member, at order number 8, I propose the question, which is that the Gambling Control Bill, National Assembly Bill number 70 of 2023, be now read a third time. Okay, I'll now put the question, and I confirm that we have enough numbers to vote on the question. I put the question, which is that the Gambling Control Bill, National Assembly Bill number 70 of 2023, be now read a third time. As many as of that opinion say aye. Will those of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to provide for the regulation of betting, casinos, and other forms of gambling, authorization of prize competitions and public lotteries, for the establishment of the Gambling Regulatory Authority of Kenya, for the imposition of tax on betting and other forms of gambling, and for connected purposes.
Clerk, and we'll go back to order number 7.
Order number 7, questions and statements.
Honorable members, you remember we directed that the Minister for Roads comes to the House today to answer a question framed by the member for Kadhiani, Robert Mbui. If the minister is around the House, he's already in the chamber. CS, welcome to the House. I'll now invite the member for Kadhiani to ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I rise to raise a question by private notice number 19 of 2023 to the CS in charge of Ministry of Roads and Transport. Mr. Speaker, first and foremost, Mr. Speaker, I want the CS to clarify on the criteria utilized for allocating funds to the improvement of roads and construction of drainage structures through the Road Maintenance Levy Fund and Development Vote as outlined in the tender notice published by the Kenya Rural Roads Authority on 29 September 2023. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I would like the CS to explain the reasons, including the factors influencing the discrepancies in the allocation of funds in road improvement projects, specifically, Mr. Speaker, noting that there was hefty allocations in some counties and omissions of certain other counties. Mr. Speaker, thirdly, I would like the CS to outline the immediate steps that his ministry is taking to ensure the equitable and fair allocation of funds for the improvement of roads and construction of drainage structures, considering the current weather circumstances experienced across the country, which are contributing to the deterioration of roads in various regions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. CS.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is my privilege to appear at the plenary of the National Assembly this afternoon in compliance with the letter from the clerk that was dated 28th of November 2023. The aforementioned invitation required me to respond to the question of private notice number 19 of 2023 and also extended leave to provide policy positions as appropriate. In the section immediately below, I have therefore responded to the question.
Minister, I want us to deal with this question because of the heavy calendar I have in the next 45 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That will include a myriad of supplementaries.
Thank you.
And joyriding.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to respond as follows. In part 1, maintenance of public roads is funded by the Road Maintenance Levy Fund, commonly known as fuel levy. The allocation of funds collected from the fuel levy is implemented in accordance with the legislation enacted by this august House. In particular, the Kenya Roads Act 1999, Section 6(2) D and E stipulates percentage allocation out of the funds as follows. 22% is allocated equally to all constituencies in the country to be administered by the Rural Roads Authority. 10% of the allocated funds is allocated for the maintenance or development of link roads between constituencies and serve as a government counterpart funds in funding work on rural roads to be administered by the Kenya Rural Roads Authority, and that the said percentum shall be equally distributed to the constituencies where Kenya Rural Authority has a mandate. 40% of the allocated funds is allocated in respect of national roads to be administered by National Roads Highway Authority. 15% of the allocated funds is allocated in respect of the urban roads to be administered by Urban Roads Authority. 1% of the allocated funds is allocated in respect of roads in national parks and reserves to be administered by the Kenya Wildlife Service. A maximum of 2% of the allocated fund is allocated in respect of the recurring expenditure of the board, and administration of the balance of 10% is in accordance with the road sector investment program approved by the Ministry of Roads. With reference to KERA, which was the subject of the question, members will note that the allocation of 32% of fuel levy, which is earmarked for rural roads, is distributed, and Mr. Speaker, with emphasis, is distributed equally to the concerned constituencies. The 10% of the fuel levy funds mentioned under Section 6 of the Kenya Roads Act is allocated to address, among others, emergencies and security roads. The Constituency Roads Committee, which have appointees of the national government CDF and the patronage of the honorable members, are valuable instruments in ensuring equity and optimal use of fuel levy at the constituency level. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is clear that the roads maintenance levy is distributed equally. It therefore means that every honorable member here is superintending and oversighting in this financial year, Mr. Speaker, an amount herein provided which is of the 22% in each and every of the 290 constituencies. We have 44,522,070. In the 10%, Mr. Speaker, you have 20,237,305. As a matter of fact, and for the record of this House, this financial year, every constituency in the Republic of Kenya, without any discrimination, receives 64 million shillings, 759 million, 375. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to development vote. Turning to the development vote, Mr. Speaker, budgetary allocation to various projects are processed through the annual budgetary cycle culminating in appropriation by the National Assembly. This budget preparation cycle includes detailed scrutiny by the Appropriation Committee of the National Assembly. It is notable that appropriations under the development vote are project specific, and once approved by Parliament, the ministry stands guided and instructed to implement the same. The initial budget allocation proposal for the development vote are generated by agencies of the ministry, taking into account the following parameters. Top priority is given to completion of ongoing projects, which is also a requirement under the Public Finance Management Act. Availability of fiscal space for new projects, government policies and strategic directions concerning infrastructure development taken together with technical and economic feasibility, equity and regional balance. Mr. Speaker, therefore, there is another category, and I wish honorable members can help me appreciate this point, Mr. Speaker, because it's the cause of so many of the questions that either come to my office privately or as generated by members of parliament in this chamber or are as addressed by members of parliament in public square. There is another category of projects which come about as a result of constitutional imperatives and public participation as guided by Parliament. Mr. Speaker, projects arising from public participation process are implemented by CARA largely without modification to the priorities selected and approved by Parliament. Through this distinguished House, I hope to make it clear to the public that such projects are entirely consistent with fairness and due process and should not be ascribed to any deficit of equitable allocation of projects by CARA. Mr. Speaker, turning to the tender notice published by Kenya Rural Roads Authority. And Mr. Speaker, I will be coming back to this issue of public participation funds that are appropriated every year by Parliament, including how much was appropriated this financial year and how this has become a matter of immense contention, despite the fact that it's the honorable members of this chamber who approve these resources. Mr. Speaker, turning to the tender published by the Kenya Rural Roads Authority on 29 September 2023, serious misunderstanding and misinterpretation of the notice appeared in various fora. I am grateful for this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to set the record straight for this distinguished House. Allow me to mention 5 key points, Mr. Speaker, at which the public were misled when the tender notice by CARA was taken in isolation as evidence of iniquity. First, Mr. Speaker, the tender contained projects that are based on termination and retendering. CARA, in implementing various development vote projects, has encountered a number of non-performing contractors. After repeated efforts to revive the affected projects failed, it was found necessary to terminate the projects. Permission has been obtained from the Attorney General to wind up the projects and conduct fresh tendering to enable continuation of the projects. For avoidance of doubt, there are other similar terminated projects for which replacement contractors will be sought through open tenders even in the future. Number 2, Mr. Speaker, is the inclusion of public participation projects. Public participation projects are identified, Mr. Speaker, and approved by Parliament before being handed over to CARA for implementation, at which point the tenders are advertised. Extraction of public participation projects from the procurement notice without background and origin being made clear and use of the same comparisons, which projects funded by other sources, leads to invalid conclusions. The projects are distributed across the country in line with the principle of public participation and other constitutional imperatives considered and determined by this House. The question, therefore, as to whether it is just, fair, or equitable is not answered, is not better answered by the Cabinet Secretary. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, it is better answered by this House. And Honorable Mbui, being a distinguished leader in this House for 2 terms, has a better answer than Cabinet Secretary or any other person, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in fact, Mr. Speaker, since the budget is itemized to specific roads, Mr. Speaker, the ministry or its agencies cannot for sure establish where the roads are located. Mr. Speaker, for the last 5 years, the fund distributed by this House through these mechanisms is in the knowledge of this House. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say for this financial year, this very chamber, this very House, Mr. Speaker, budgeted a sum total of 21 billion shillings, which is far higher than the money allocated to KERA under road maintenance levy through the RMLF. So if the distribution of these resources, Mr. Speaker, to various agencies as budgeted is unfair, then neither KERA nor the ministry will be blamed, because we are constitutionally bound to implement the decisions of this House without injecting a scintilla of doubt, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the third indicator of the projects that were advertised is where we have cases of emergency, like the situation with El Nino. The ministry allocated resources either from the emergency fund or other sources to address these emergencies. The emergencies arise as works are tendered by any road agency for purpose of repair. Those activities are specific to network reinstatement, to the geographical location in question, and generalized comparisons with other counties, for example, are not valid. Such projects also include security roads aimed at improving security operations. Where we have cases of emergency, like in the case of El Nino, the ministry will allocate resources either from the contingency fund or from other sources, including those budgeted by this House. Such allocation shall not be misconstrued to mean unfair allocation of resources, because they will be addressing, Mr. Speaker, what in law is called force majeure, or otherwise known as the act of God. Fourth, Mr. Speaker, is the aggregated funding towards constituency roads identified by Constituent Roads Committee. Mr. Speaker, a number, and this is important also for emphasis, Mr. Speaker, a number of the Constituency Roads Committee have gained experience, have found that it is best to combine various approved budgetary allocation into one bigger project, which is tendered as one package. Mr. Speaker, the consequence of this approach was that the size of the project tends to exceed the regional threshold of 10 million, which necessitates KERA to conduct the procurement at a national level. It can be seen that if these aggregated initiatives are extracted in isolation from their procurement notice and used in general comparison with CRCs, which have not adopted the same approach, errors would result, Mr. Speaker. The notorious constituencies for which type of costs are those that are in for this type of costs are those that are in urban and peri-urban areas, such as Kikuyu constituency, where the majority leader, Mr. Speaker, comes from. When the adverts appear nationally, people tend to question why are these areas having been considered with big projects, when in reality they have aggregated their resources to one project, Mr. Speaker, and like many other constituencies, especially in rural areas, which receive equal amounts to the same constituencies, but choose to allocate them to projects of less than 10 million shillings, and therefore advertised at the regional level. So, Mr. Speaker, some of the members of parliament here guiding their constituency roads committee decide that instead of funding roads of less than 10 million shillings, they aggregate their money to 20, to 30, to 40, and decide that it be advertised at the national level by KERA because of the constitutional and legal imperatives for advertisement. As a result, you will find, for example, Kikuyu constituency in the advert that was shared by Honorable Mbui, they are there advertising a project, but the other constituencies across the country where they advertise their roads below 10 million cannot appear in the advert because they will appear in the regional advert where these advertisements occur. And again, Mr. Speaker, taking it in isolation would appear as though one constituency is getting more than the other. Yet it is just about how those resources are being utilized by the constituency. Mr. Speaker, it is, Mr. Speaker, 50 is misinterpretation of project cost as an annual budget. And this is where, again, the question of Honorable Mbui, Mr. Speaker, is extremely important. Part of the misinformation associated with KERA notice number of 29th September 2023, Mr. Speaker, is insinuation that the multi-year global cost estimate for various projects was in fact a budget allocation for a single year and thus an indication of a skewed allocation of scarce resources. While this incorrect interpretation is easily detected and corrected through cross-reference to approved budgets by this House and approved annual road work plans, I take this opportunity to once again assure the House that the allegations of skewed resource allocation was utterly without basis. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I have been baffled by the utterances by both inside and outside these chambers by elected representatives of the people who have been given enormous mandate and responsibility to do this sacred duty of distributing the public resources, Mr. Speaker, to turn around the whole world, either feign ignorance, Mr. Speaker, on the public,
Order.
Or, Mr. Speaker,
Order, honorable members.
Or, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Robert Mbui, what is out of order?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
he's answering your question, remember?
Mr. Speaker, I do agree, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, you know that this is a question that I raised in the House Business Committee that you chair. And we agreed as a House that instead of talking about it, even in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, because I had wanted to seek for your permission to do an adjournment motion, we agreed that we ask the CS so that he can come and clarify. Mr. Speaker, is the CS in order to lecture members of Parliament? And I want to say what he has said, that he is baffled by utterances, both inside and outside these chambers, Mr. Speaker, by elected representatives of the people who have been given a mandate to turn around the whole world and either feign ignorance or deliberately mislead the public. Mr. Speaker, is the CS allowed to say such words in this House? Mr. Speaker, the CS has to withdraw that statement and apologize to this House.
He is answering your question. Let him finish. You will interrogate him.
Mr. Speaker.
Minister, order. Order, honorable members. I have brought the minister for you to grill him on whatever you want. That grilling and questioning excludes shouting at the minister. So listen to him. When he finishes, everybody will have an opportunity to ask questions which I shall compel him to answer. But let's have some decorum in the House. Minister, try and paraphrase your answers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
The reason why, Mr. Speaker, I have to go this length to answer in detail is, Mr. Speaker, there is a misconstrued position in the public that certain constituencies or certain counties or certain communities are getting projects more than the others. Mr. Speaker, I have overemphasized that should there be unfair distribution of these resources, Mr. Speaker, the problem squarely lies in the House that allocates the resources. Mr. Speaker, I will be willing, Mr. Speaker, I will be willing to be educated where else budget takes place in the Republic of Kenya. The only supreme august house in the Republic of Kenya which allocates resources and not, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Order, Minister, take your seat. Honorable members, let's take the answer. Minister, try and paraphrase. Yes. You have made your policy statement. avoid the temptation to appear as if you are lecturing members. Order, I need no assistance. I need no assistance from any one of you. Avoid the temptation to appear as if you are lecturing members. Answer the question. Indeed, many of these members keep coming to my chamber to raise the same questions. That's why you've been called here. When he finishes, I'll give you time to ask questions. I had allocated 45 minutes. I'll even allocate more time for you to ask questions and be satisfied with what the minister is doing in your constituencies and elsewhere in the country.
For the assurance of the House, Mr. Speaker, I will be tabling itemized budget by this House past this financial year, clear with indication of the money for every road and for every county and for every constituency. So that, Mr. Speaker, it becomes clear that there is no other entity in this country or in the world that budgets for roads for our country, except this honorable, august House. Mr. Speaker, it is unfortunate, therefore, that these projects were misconstrued as an introduction of new projects. For avoidance of doubt, Mr. Speaker, the replacements of non-performing contractors, I'm just giving a summary of what you say, as you said, Mr. Speaker, that